I come before you at this time to enter a plea for American independence. It is amazing that one should have to plead for American independence in a nation with a heritage such as ours, in a nation which in its infancy revolted against foreign control, and whose people have fought time and time again against the armies and interference of the old world. Yet the independence and the destiny of America were never more in jeopardy than they are today. Why, with 130 million people, are we being told that we must give up our independent position, that our frontiers lie in Europe, and that our destiny will be decided by European armies fighting on European soil? What has happened to this nation that it fears in maturity the forces that it conquered in its youth? What change has come over us? What foreign influence has sprung up among us?
This video has taken me the longest, maybe, of any video that I've ever worked on, primarily because I wasn't sure how to approach it. The film in question has so many shocking aspects to it that it's kind of hard to put into words a lot of what you're seeing when you watch it. But thankfully, I discovered the film was in the public domain. So I would have a rare opportunity and be able to just show you large parts of the film without having to find the words that could not really describe accurately or even believably what I'd seen. The film that I'm talking about was released in 1934, and this is important because the content of the film is no accident. It's very contextual for the time. Hitler had been appointed Chancellor of Germany just a year before, and Jewish organizations all around the world were beginning to lead boycotts against Germany as he railed against what he described as an international Jewish banking establishment, which included the extremely wealthy and powerful Rothschild family. In fact, the Nazis would later take control of the Rothschild family holdings in Austria in 1938, which, and we can't know for sure, but might have been what inspired Winston Churchill to later state, the unforgivable sin of Hitler's Germany was to develop a new economic system by which the international bankers were deprived of their profits. And while these events hadn't yet come to pass in 1934 when this film was released, the writing, you might say, was on the wall. People, not just in Germany, but in Italy and elsewhere, were beginning to question the role of the international banking establishment in domestic and international affairs. The common people rarely look fondly on bankers, and so it should come as no surprise that information warfare would precede the real life and death warfare that the common people would then have to fight. In 1933, William Goetz, Raymond Griffith, and Darrell F. Zanuck would produce a film that would attempt to not only depict the Rothschild family as a hardworking family deserving of their vast wealth, but also as underdogs that, despite all odds, rose to their positions by honorably serving and even saving the European people. Saving the European people that hated them out of irrational anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism that had infected the European people for centuries and now was out of control in Germany. The Rothschild family, you see, they hadn't gotten rich by funding wars. They'd grown wealthy by funding peace. The House of Rothschild was a big hit. It was the biggest film released by the newly formed 20th Century Pictures that was founded by the film's producer, Darrell F. Zanuck. It was also nominated for an Oscar for Best Picture. And even today, it boasts 100% on Rotten Tomatoes from professional critics, although the audience doesn't seem to quite agree. Now, before we dive into the film, I have to give this disclaimer because what might have been a critically acclaimed, Oscar-nominated hit in 1934 might come across as something a little bit different today. So I just have to say and remind the audience, and that includes the YouTube censors, that this film is a film produced by Jewish filmmakers about Jewish historical figures. And because this film is in the public domain, and to avoid being accused of twisting the film's message, I will be playing unedited clips that accurately represent the vision of the Jewish filmmakers as much as possible. The film opens up by giving us a dramatized version of the Rothschild family origin story. It begins in Frankfurt, Germany, or Prussia, as it was called in 1780. A sign explains to the audience that we are in the Jewish quarter of the city. It was a common thing in many parts of Europe to restrict Jewish inhabitants to a segregated neighborhood that would be closed off to the rest of the city at sundown. This was also the case here in Prussia. Prussian guards are seen locking down the Jewish quarter at night. The patriarch of the Rothschild family, a money changer by the name of Mayer Amschel Rothschild, is shown in a humble home located in the Jewish ghetto. This depiction of a humble home is a bit of an exaggeration, of course. This is the real home of Mayer Rothschild. He was hardly struggling to get by, and in addition to having several wealthy clients, including the Crown Prince Wilhelm, he became extremely wealthy by facilitating payments to the Hessian mercenaries from Britain during the French Revolution. But let's just ignore all of that and enjoy the film. This is Mayer. He's very nervous that his gold delivery hasn't come in yet. His wife tells him not to worry, and then remarks that the business looks like it must be really good, according to his books.
It'll be here in the morning.
Yes, but if anything should happen, all that money, 10,000 gulden.
Eh? So much this journey?
7,000 in one lump from Prince Lowenstein's agent, and then all the small sums, 10,000 at least.
Business is good, eh?
Nearly 1,000 gulden since morning.
Mayer then tells his wife a story about how he tricks his European customers into thinking that they have the upper hand, and that it's always important in business to deceive your clients into thinking that they're dealing with a foolish person, because it makes them easier to trick when you really want to make some money.
That agent, did you notice him?
What?
There he sat, sly and smiling, planning to rob this poor old Jew Rothschild. And here I was, so innocent, a little child, a baby, in fact. And there was that fine old clock that his master had sent him to bargain for.
Yes.
And when at last I let him have it for less money than it cost me, I could see in his eyes how pleased he was that he got the better of this little baby.
Sold it under cost?
A spat to catch a mackerel, Mama. He thinks he's so clever, and I'm so stupid. Always make them think they're clever.
This next scene, it's a little interesting to see how the filmmakers thought they should show Mayer Rothschild as a clever man, able to deceive the Europeans that they did business with. And in this scene, a young Nathan Rothschild runs home to tell his father that the Prussian tax collector is coming.
Mama, quick, it's Nathan!
Mama, the tax collector.
Oh.
Papa, the tax collector. He's down the street. Shut guard.
The Rothschild family then proceeds to hide their wealth from the tax collector. They even go so far as to hide their dinner, change their clothes into rags, and swap out their real accounting books for fake books, fraudulent books that show that he hasn't actually been doing any business.
The tax collector, boys. Mama, put away the silver.
I have. Don't forget my account book.
Oh, run away. What do you know about it?
Everything is in one tax collector gold.
Take those hats off.
Here, Mama.
Yes.
Hurry up, Carl. Couple up, James. Over the fireplace. Remember, no deal for the last 5 days. Understand?
Yeah, Father.
Are you hungry?
Not so very.
Then look hungry.
Look hungry.
Anson Solomon, you remain below. Mama, hide the roast. Get off, Jim.
The tax collector comes and he's rude and stupid and anti-Semitic.
Open up, Jew!
The Rothschild family proceeds to lie to the tax collector and eventually bribes him for a fraction of what he owes.
Who is it, Nathan?
Now then, Rothschild,
Why, it's my good friend, the tax collector.
bring out your account book.
Certainly, sir. Here it is. I was just looking over it. Things are very bad. I was saying to my poor wife, Gudula, this is our friend, the tax collector. Never have I known such a bad month.
No.
For 5 days, not one garden have I seen. Customers come, yes, but they don't buy.
No.
And no one's traveling these days, so my exchange business is worse than nothing. I shall soon starve.
What do you take me for? Now bring out the real books.
Real books? Why, Excellency, I don't understand what you mean.
Search the house. Pull the beds apart. Now, what would it be worth to me if I put you down for 2,000 this time?
A very handsome present for your Excellency. Say, 1,000 gulden.
Talk sense, Rothschild. I want 10,000.
Would you leave me and my family penniless?
With a great deal of pleasure. Come now.
Well, perhaps 3,000 gulden, but that's the limit. The actual limit.
I'll take 6,000.
Oh, very well. We'll make it 5,000.
All right. Have it ready tomorrow. I'll call.
So after bargaining down his 20,000 tax debt to 2,000 with a 5,000 bribe, Mayer calls his family together to congratulate them on their deception and corruption.
Boys, you did well. Nathan, you're a smart lad. That wine, Mama, you should have seen him. And after all, a 5,000 gulden isn't as bad as it might have been.
No.
But it is bad to have to pay away 5,000 gulden.
Not as bad as having to pay away 20,000, Father.
Now remember, this is supposed to make the Rothschild look good. The film is so oblivious to how this might be perceived by honest, hardworking people, they inexplicably left this scene in the movie the way it is. A scene that makes the Rothschild look so bad and unethical, it's actually used in a Nazi propaganda film called The Eternal Jew, completely unedited. So anyway, back to the film. The celebration is cut short when a messenger comes to tell them that the gold they were waiting for has been confiscated by the authorities.
Mr. Rothschild, what's the matter? What's happened? The man who was bringing your money from Hamburg has been waylaid by the tax agents outside the city. What? They heard he was bringing the money to Jew Street. They might have killed him, but he got away.
He got away with the money.
No, they got it, Mr. Rothschild. They got the money.
What? All of it?
Yes, all of it.
Do you hear that, Mama? Do you hear that, all of you? 10,000 gulden. Our money that we worked for. Why doesn't your Majesty strike them dead?
Papa, don't get excited. It's bad for you.
Listen, you are young. Your lives are before you. You've got to fight.
Fight for yourselves. Fight for our people.
Which people does he mean, I wonder?
I live honestly. I trade honestly. I want to be honest with them, but they won't let us. We are Jews, taxed to death, forbidden to learn a trade, forbidden to own land. They keep us in chains. They send men here to rob us. So work and strive for money. Money is power. Money is the only weapon that the Jew has to defend himself with. Oh, never.
Well, I guess that clears that up. Poor, persecuted Mayor Rothschild is on his deathbed with his children gathered around, and he has a plan he wants to tell them before he dies.
Much money is lost through sending gold by coach from one country to another. In times of war, it is seized by the enemy. In times of peace, by thieves. You are 5 brothers. I want you each to start a banking business in a different country. One to go and open a house in Paris, one in Vienna, one in London. Choose the most important centers, so that when money is to be sent from here to London, let us say, you won't have to risk life and gold. And here in Frankfurt, we'll just send a letter to Nathan in London saying, pay so-and-so. And that will be offset by loans from London to Frankfurt. Understand?
Yes.
In your day, there will be many wars in Europe. And nations that have money to transport will come to the Rothschilds because it will be safe.
And so his plan to send his sons to all the major cities in Europe to become money changers that would work together with paper notes instead of hard currency that might get stolen. The film, of course, never talks about another aspect of paper debt, the fractional lending that keeps bankers rich off of interest payments on money they don't even have. But I'm sure that was just an honest omission on the part of the filmmakers.
Remember, unity is strength. All your lives you must stand by one another. No one brother must be allowed to fail while another brother succeeds. Your 5 banking houses may cover Europe, but you will be one firm, one family, the Rothschilds, who work always together. That will be your power. And when that power comes, remember the ghetto.
I shall be here. I shall never leave the house where they were all born.
And remember this before all, that neither business, nor power, nor all the gold in Europe will bring you happiness till we, our people, have equality, respect, dignity, to trade with dignity, to live with dignity, to walk the world with dignity.
I think this scene is kind of interesting for a movie that was released in 1934, given the Rothschild family role in the creation of Israel after World War II. But think of that what you will. So the movie goes on to tell the viewers that the Rothschild family created banks in all of Europe's capitals and slowly gained power by funding the various wars across the continent, often both sides of these wars. One can only wonder how history might have played out had there not been these oligarchs backing the bloodshed, or European royalty willing to become debt slaves of international bankers rather than just lose the superficial power of their crowns. One of these conflicts in particular is the victory of Duke Wellington over Napoleon, who was then exiled to the island of Elba. In the following scenes, there's a repeated message for the audience. Without the help of Nathan Rothschild, Mayor's son who formed the Rothschild Bank in London, Napoleon would have won. It's only because of the great service of Nathan Rothschild that we're not all speaking French. Duke Wellington can't compliment Nathan Rothschild enough, and is so upset that he's been excluded from the victory party because of anti-Semitism that he goes to visit him directly and give his thanks.
Why wasn't Rothschild here?
Now, some feeling.
Wasn't he asked?
Well, no, Your Grace. Some of these people...
Wasn't the man who paid for these dash wars important enough?
It wasn't a question of importance,
Well, if he can't come here, I suppose we can still go there. If Fitz!
Yes, sir.
Just as soon as I can get away, we're going to call on Nathan Rothschild. He ought to have been here.
While Wellington goes to congratulate Nathan on saving Europe from having to speak French, we get to a fictional part of the film that, in my opinion, was designed to tackle the perception that Europeans and Americans had that Jews were a separate people, that even once they rose to prominence like Nathan Rothschild, never really integrated into the cultures or the people of their host nation. Julie Rothschild is in a romantic relationship with one of Duke Wellington's captains. Despite how this relationship is a subplot of the film, it's entirely fictional. Nathan did have a daughter named Julie, but she was never involved with any of the English Gentiles. In fact, she married a Jewish banker named Meyer Levin Bafus. But as you'll see, this fictional relationship is used to depict Nathan Rothschild as a progressive man who overcomes his own prejudice and stops caring about the tradition and loyalties of his faith, but cares about being a British nationalist who is eventually proud to have his daughter marry one of Duke Wellington's men. While the two lovebirds make plans for marriage, Duke Wellington tells Nathan that despite what the crowds outside might think, it wasn't him that won the war. No, it was Nathan Rothschild. He's the man they should be praising.
Hush, hush, hush. I've had that crowd at me heels all day. If they had any sense, it's you they'd be following around.
But Nathan is a loyal and humble international banker and tells Wellington that he was just trying to bring peace, despite Europeans always hating him for no reason. And now the propaganda goes into overdrive. The film wasn't just released in America, you got to remember. It was released all around the world, including England, which was being pressured heavily to oppose Hitler's Germany.
And I hope one day Europe will realize she owes you something more than money.
Well, my father was a man of peace. He told us never to loan money to make wars, always to end them. And that's been our principle.
Well, everybody knows that and respects you for it.
No, Your Grace, they don't know it. And they don't respect us. Other bankers are jealous of us. The man in the street thinks we're just Sherlocks. And Europe hides its head for shame because it borrows from the Jews.
I suppose you know it's that Prussian fellow, Count Lederans, that's responsible for that rot.
I know. He hates me and all my race.
He's a proper jackass, Rothschild, and he ought to be hanged.
I must admit that the same happy thought has occurred to me more than once.
You know, it's a danger having a man like that in authority. Always making enemies.
You see, all of Europe loves and respects the Rothschilds. It's only these terrible racist Germans that hate them for no reason. It's a danger having men like that in authority, always making enemies. Wellington continues to praise Nathan, and as a special thanks, he tells him that the French are going to be looking for a loan to rebuild after the war, and that if he outbids the other bankers, he'll become the most powerful banker in the world.
I see, Rothschild. A little secret. Mind you, I oughtn't to tell you this, but I just heard this morning that they're going to float a dash big loan to put France on her feet. An enormous loan. The biggest thing ever issued.
Yes?
Well, they've got to do something. France has had 20 years of war and the whole country's torn up. But now they've got peace. They're going to get together, the five allied powers, and help her out.
And the banking house that floats this loan will at once become the most powerful in Europe. Its prestige will be enormous.
That's it. And now's your chance.
Your Grace, I can't sufficiently thank you for this information.
Mind you, it's a dash dark secret.
Before Wellington leaves, Nathan Rothschild tells his captain that he knows about his romance with his daughter, but he approves. He then instructs his messenger to tell all of his brothers to stop making loans and to get ready to make the loan of the century, the loan to the French. This is their chance to finally challenge the European bankers and become the most powerful banking family in the world. The problem is when he goes to hear the French decision on which bank they have chosen for the loan. He discovers they have thrown his offer out because they would prefer to work with European bankers. The film, of course, tries to make this look like senseless anti-Semitism. How dare a European country prefer to keep its financial future in the hands of Europeans?
Your bid was received, Mr. Rothschild. But to put it as delicately as possible, it was thrown out, shall we say, on a technicality.
A technicality? What am I to understand by that?
You are at liberty to give my statement any interpretation you choose.
You mean, in brief, I am a Jew?
Likewise, in brief, I do.
This is kind of maddening given that just moments ago, earlier in the film, the patriarch, Nathan's father, Meyer Rothschild, made it clear that the Rothschilds' loyalties are with their people.
Remember, unity is strength. All your lives you must stand by one another. No one brother must be allowed to fail while another brother succeeds.
Why then are the Europeans evil for wanting to have this same in-group preference when it comes to something so important as the future of their nation? And as we'll see, they might have been wise to think that this was important when Nathan Rothschild reacts the way that he does with a threat that he means to make good on.
Gentlemen, I must accept your decision. But since Count Ladrans has been frank enough to admit the reason for our exclusion, I venture to advise him that these attacks on my race are ignorant and futile. He may strike and strike again. A Jew falls, 1,000 are wounded, but the race lives on. But unfortunately for His Excellency, we are evidently eternal.
First he goes home and forbids his daughter to marry the Gentile. This is war.
My bid was thrown out on a technicality.
A technicality?
Because I am a Jew. But they did me a great service. They showed me just how they were going to behave to Julie if she married into their set.
All his feigned nationalism and respect for the nations that made him rich has gone right out the window. He was denied power over the people he sees as persecutors, and now he'll make them pay. Rothschild now hatches a plan. He knows that the European bankers are going to sell government bonds they acquired at the pre-sale when they granted the loan that he was excluded from to the public for a profit. Rothschild has decided that to get his revenge, he's going to dump all of the government bonds he already has until it drives the price down so low that it ruins the other bankers and leaves them holding worthless paper.
Hannah, I'll tell you exactly what's in my mind. And this may interest you too, Roth. Bering and those others headed by Ladrans have taken this new loan at 71. On the first of the month, they're going to offer it to the public at 74. It pays 4%. But there is already in existence a previous government bond which also pays 4%, of which we have a large holding. This bond is now selling at 73. Hannah says I'm tired, but I'm not too tired to realize that if the public can buy one government bond for 73, they won't buy a new issue bearing the same interest for 74.
That's true, sir. But Bering and the other bankers will run up the old bonds, and when they rise to about 75...
I know what you're going to say. They'll make the old ones rise, and then launch the new ones a point lower, and the public rushes in.
Quite so, sir.
But suppose there is no rise. Suppose somebody pricks the balloon and it doesn't go up. Suppose before they can run it up, somebody else begins to run it down. Suppose by the first of the month, these old bonds now selling at 73 should fall down to 63. Then they couldn't possibly launch the new loan at 74 because nobody would buy it. No. And Bering and Ladrans and his little band of bankrupt brigands will wait for it to go up. But suppose instead of going up, it still goes down to 55, to 50, to 45, to 40, why they'll never be able to launch the loan at all.
A modern analogy would be this. Imagine Rothschild has a bunch of Bitcoin that he bought when the price was $6,000. The price his competitors just got the Bitcoin was at $7,000. And they plan to sell in a few days when it's projected that the price will be slightly over $7,000. So Rothschild is going to start selling all of his Bitcoin until the price begins to drop and create a selling panic that drives the price all the way down to $5,000 or even lower before his competitors, who already paid $7,000 for their Bitcoin, can sell on the market, which would leave them with a bunch of Bitcoin they can't sell without going out of business. So think about that. The Europeans didn't want to trust this man because they wanted bankers that were invested in the future of the nation that was getting the loan. They wanted European bankers to finance a European loan. And they exclude Rothschild because they don't trust him. And Rothschild proves them all right by vengefully crashing the market because all he cares about is money. And this is supposed to make Nathan Rothschild look clever and good, instead of the vengeful miser, you could say, it makes him look like today. So in this next scene, the panic has begun. Everyone is selling, and the European banking houses are about to be ruined. They call him in and beg him to stop the panic. And he tells them he will only stop selling if they sign over all of their shares that they bought at 70 to him at 68. They will still lose money, but at least they won't be ruined. So with no other choice, the bankers agree, and they sign over their shares to Rothschild, and he becomes the most powerful banker in Europe. And this is just what's admitted to in the film. The audience is supposed to think, well, it serves those bankers right for being so anti-Semitic. But as we'll see later in the film, even the brainwashed audience will have its limits, as the filmmakers decide to twist the story behind how the Rothschilds truly secured their banking financial dynasties. But first, the Rothschilds must endure even more senseless anti-Semitism. You see, when the public in Germany, or Prussia as it was called then, catch wind of what the Rothschilds have done, riots break out in the Jewish quarter, and the German people begin throwing bricks through the windows of their homes. Nathan goes to retrieve his elderly mother, but she won't go with him.
But we want you to come away with us for a few months. You're not safe here.
I was born here and I'll die here. And that won't be soon either. I'll live a dozen years yet. Nathan, you ought to know enough about bargains to know the Lord isn't going to take me at 88 when he can get me at 100.
The English captain also comes to the Rothschilds' family home where Nathan has sent his daughter away to. But Nathan says he cannot marry his daughter because Europeans are just too anti-Semitic.
What is your objection?
You're not of our race.
That's an objection I think you might have raised a great deal earlier.
I was a sentimental fool. Walk through this ghetto. Go into the Jewish quarter of any town in Prussia today, and you'll see men lying dead. Julie's people killed by your people for but one crime, that they were Jews.
But then Nathan finds out that even the Jews are mad at him because they know that the riots have started because he crashed the market to get even with the European bankers, namely the very Aryan-looking German banker from the meeting.
Jews of Prussia know that this uprising is the direct result of your quarrel with Latrans, and that has made them bitter against you.
But Nathan has a plan to get out of this fix. He finds out that Napoleon has escaped exile and is back in France, raising an army, and is planning once again to conquer Europe. The Germans and English, as well as most of Europe, will need his money to fight Napoleon. He decides that he will only lend them money if they stop the riots and no longer make the Jews live in segregation. And of course, Nathan, ever the clever businessman, first lies to the Germans and tells them that Napoleon has offered them twice the interest that the Germans can offer, and he intends to take the deal.
As you say, we are moneylenders, not philanthropists. We do it for profit. You may as well know that Napoleon has offered us twice as much as you can promise us, and we've decided to take his offer.
Gone over to the enemy, eh? I must admit, I'm amazed.
How will Napoleon get the money to pay you? Steal it. But that's not our business.
So after lying to the Germans and the rest of the European allies and forcing them to increase their interest and agree to abolish Jewish ghettos, he tells them he will grant their loan.
Very well, we accept.
Pray excuse this, my lords. Some Gentile has evidently strayed into our quarter.
And now we get to the big lie and the finale of the film. Napoleon seems as though he cannot be defeated. Duke Wellington is meeting him on the battlefield for what will be the battle that decides the fate of Europe. Now first I'm going to tell you what really happened, and then I'll show you how the film tells the exact same story. Just like the rest of London, Nathan Rothschild knew that if Napoleon won the battle against Lord Wellington, the bond market in London would crash. Everyone would sell their positions the same way they did earlier in the film when Rothschild engineered a crash of the bond market to steal the French loan from the European bankers. The market was very jittery already, and all eyes were on Nathan Rothschild because they knew that with all of his banking branches across the continent, he had a communications network set up that worked like a well-oiled machine at a time when communications had to be delivered by hand. Nathan Rothschild had men stationed in view of the battlefield ready to ride back to London the moment either Duke Wellington or Napoleon was declared the victor, so he would know before anyone else how the market would react. Now because of this, Nathan Rothschild learned almost a full 24 hours before the English government even knew that Wellington had defeated Napoleon. So with this information in his hand, knowing that when the news reached the rest of London that the market would skyrocket, he did as he had done before, and he started a selling panic on the market. He began liquidating all of his positions, and other traders, fearing that he knew something that they didn't know, that Napoleon had won, they began selling at a loss. When the prices sufficiently dropped, Rothschild began buying everything up, including shares he had sold earlier in the day, but now at a fraction of the price that he had sold them. And when the news finally came that Wellington had defeated Napoleon, the prices indeed skyrocketed, and Nathan Rothschild became the richest man in the world. That's what really happened. And while the film wanted people to know that Nathan Rothschild was clever and capable of such underhanded tricks when it came to screwing over anti-Semitic bankers, it would probably leave a bad taste in their mouths if they really got the full picture. So the movie tells this story a little bit differently. One might say 180 degrees out of phase. In the film, one of Rothschild's agents tells him that the market is spooked. They think Napoleon is going to win, and a selling panic that Rothschild totally didn't start has begun. But Nathan, ever the loyal subject and patriot, decides to valiantly go to the market floor and begin buying up everything he can afford in order to shore up confidence. Don't sell, buy, he shouts at them. Have faith and peace for Europe.
Am I to continue to buy?
Yes.
But it's sheer suicide, sir.
Buy. Support the market.
But we can't possibly keep it up, sir.
I'm fighting in the only way I can fight, with money. I'm giving all I've got to give for the peace of Europe. And whatever other Englishmen do tomorrow, I buy today. I go. Buy. Buy. Yes, buy.
You see, this is what accounted for his vast holdings acquired during the panic. It's not that he started the panic. He totally didn't cause it. He was just trying to restore confidence and bought everything at a fraction of the price because all the frightened Gentiles were just selling and they didn't have faith in Britain like he did. And of course, once news of Napoleon's defeat finally did reach London, they hailed him as a hero. He was the hero that Europe needed but didn't deserve. The hero that saved the Allied nations against Napoleon. And it was only right that he became the richest man in the world. He was the only one that had faith in the Allies. He gave everything that he had so that his people and the European people might succeed. And in the end, now that he was the richest man alive, he would also let his daughter marry a filthy Gentile because, after all, while money can buy kings and queens and war and nations and entire continents, maybe the whole world, it's okay that you're poor because the one thing money can't buy is love. For BlackPilled, I'm Devin Stack. If you like my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you share. If you want to support my work and grab a copy of my book, the link is in the description, or you can send crypto to one of the addresses below, or go to patreon.com/BlackPilled or Subscribestar.